Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents with me, your host, Valerie, and sometime co-host, Miss Purrington. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. We bring you articles and podcasts featuring the best in Austin comedy in all its shapes and formats. The podcast project began in early 2016. We love interviewing funny people and sharing their stories. I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations, and will sometimes take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the Austin comedy scene one of the best in the country. Today I sit down with someone I've gotten to know over the last few months. Reliable, professional, and equipped with one of the best smiles ever, my guest today has performed with the venerable Bridgetown Comedy Festival, and he just wrapped up a number of performances at the Out of Bounds Comedy Festival. You'll be able to catch him next month as he spars Devin Walker on Spite Club at the Velveeta Room. And now Comedy Wham presents our guest, Justin Hicks.
Hey, thank you for that.
Hey.
That was very nice. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
We had some technical difficulties, but we made it.
Well, you're being very generous by saying we, because clearly the technical difficulty was on my side of the table.
Sometimes we figured it out early. That's what counts.
That's true. That would have been just really heartbreaking to do this interview and then realize nobody can hear it because you have the plug in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, welcome, Justin. Thanks for making the trek out.
Thanks for having me.
And we talked beforehand. You've done some homework.
Done a little bit. Listened to a few sods.
Yeah. So you know the question that's coming up.
Yeah.
We're going to break the ice, and you're going to tell me one word to describe your past.
One word to describe my past. I'd say educational for sure.
Educational. Okay. Cool. And I know because of seeing you perform several times over the last few months, you make it very much a part of your sets. Mm-hmm. You are from Connecticut.
I'm from Connecticut, yeah.
And what was that like?
It was great. I mean, Connecticut's it's a really nice place. I grew up in like a very small town. Not even really, I wouldn't even call it suburban. It's probably more like rural. Like right now it has like 8,000 people, but growing up it probably had more like 5 to 7 or 5 to 6. Really small town, but really beautiful kind of New England, what you'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
And a really good place to grow up. So I can't complain, but obviously living in Texas, there's a lot of differences that stand out. So I think a lot of my humor probably comes from that, just the differences between those two places.
Yeah, it is a very prominent part of your comedy.
Yeah.
Did you grow up watching or listening to comedy?
Definitely. I think I definitely didn't know I wanted to do comedy as a kid. That didn't really occur to me until I was a lot older. But my parents definitely exposed us to a lot of, especially my mom, like a lot of movies and media. We watched SNL, we watched Mad TV, watched In Living Color. I remember watching like Def Comedy Jam with my grandma. So we definitely had like a pretty good exposure to it. And, I guess probably gives you kind of a subliminal palette for comedy as you get older. So for sure.
Yeah. Are there any standout sketches or performers that you think of?
I think In Living Color stood out to me because it was so diverse and it was in mainstream television. So that really stood out to me at a young age. And when I say diverse, I mean, it wasn't just because you had a lot of, prominent black figures on that show, but you had a lot of good white, like Jim Carrey was on that show.
Exactly.
And that always stood out to me too. But I think probably the first stand-up set that stood out to me was Kings of Comedy, set at the Entertainer had like a set that always kind of stayed with me. It's just the most, I don't know, like entertaining 15 to 20 minutes I'd ever seen at that point. And always like, I could still watch it. It's funny to me.
Yeah.
Every single time. So that was probably one of the first stand-up sets I saw. I was like, oh wow, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So did you do any performance at all when you were?
No, I was definitely always a class clown. That was definitely from very early on. I was a class clown. But I never did theater or any sort of performance art to that point. I played sports young. I was a late bloomer. I wasn't very good until I was in high school, but I did play sports and that was my main thing. I was more of a creative type. Like I did a lot of writing and I did like poetry a lot in middle school, stuff like that. But no, I never got on stage until I was older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you? Well, I mean, we are burning. You're like you have over prepared. I think, Justin. You're just knocking out these questions. Do you? What do we need to know before we get to the question of how did you get
into
to
comedy?
Your first,
things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, I always had like it's to perform. I just didn't know what capacity it would be in. Like, I know my dad always recommended, like, cause I was pretty animated as a kid. He always said, you should at least try like theater or try acting and things like that. But I was always kind of apprehensive because I think, like theater is work. And I remember, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And, I was always pretty intimidated by it because the people who did it, even, in my high school were really good. Like the musicals that they put on were always really good. Mm-hmm. And it was really like a whole other class and commitment. And I just wasn't interested in that at that time. I always went to the plays and watched them and had a feeling like, oh, maybe one day I want to be on stage, but it had to be the right facet. And I knew like acting at the time wasn't something I really wanted to do. But,
you're in a small school too. So like did I hear 8,000 was
hometown was 8,000. So I went to the town I grew up in was called Woodbury, really small town. I went to private school in a city called Waterbury. It's like 30 minutes from where I grew up. Which was an even smaller school, but it was in a city. So it gave me a little bit of a more diverse, feel for things. Like we played city schools and sports and I got to meet a lot of different people. So it was a good experience. But like my graduating class was like 160 people.
Wow.
So every single person in your class. Yeah. And I think like to that point, we were one of the smallest classes in that school's, history, a little school called Holy Cross. So yeah, but the theater was always really good, and it was, the whole idea of doing it was scary and like intimidating, so I never did it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that always strikes me to ask when somebody says they were from a small town is when you're in a small town, you don't get the exposure to that city.
Just different types of people and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, and let alone think, there's a place for me to go perform.
For sure.
I wanted to.
For sure. No, I definitely felt like that. Like, I felt like, I think we were talking about this with your son. You said he's going to like a different school and it's going to be like a whole other world. And it really does happen where, I think when you get stuck where you're hanging around the same exact people by the time you get to middle school, like 10, 13 years, I think you see yourself as one person. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really healthy to, branch out and just meet other people, be around other people and see what you're capable of. So, I mean, going to a different high school, at first I hated it because you don't really know anybody, but some of the people I went to school there, I'm still friends with now. And I think it definitely was a big step for me kind of growing up. Yeah. So it was good.
And is that where you kind of had that crown of the class clown?
No, see, so that was before. So that's interesting. Like, the weird thing about me is like, I'm pretty laid back now. I'm pretty reserved. But when I was like young, like elementary school, I was just super rambunctious and loud and talkative and, always a class clown. But I went to high school. I was pretty quiet. Like among my friends, I was pretty funny, but I was like super well behaved, like never got detention, very quiet. So yeah, it was actually like a change for me. I was very different in high school from early. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, making that big change from a school that
small. Yeah. I think that's a part of it. You don't feel as comfortable.
Take note of that for
yeah. Tell your son that.
You're going to start behaving finally. Okay. So, but we haven't gotten to that. At what point do you think about that kind of on stage?
I was thinking about this week, kind of preparing, and I don't know. There wasn't, I think for me, there wasn't a single moment where I said, I want to do stand up. I kind of just weaned into it slowly. I think like the first time I did comedy was, I want to say it was like April of 2015, was the first time I did a mic.
Wow.
And, before that, I think like in 2013, I had a friend, it was a couple, they're married now, but they had a friend who was doing improv and stand up, and they would go to his like mics and shows sometimes, and they would invite, they put like an invite out on Facebook and I would go. Mm-hmm. And I think I went to like live at, the Cold Town mic when Maggie was hosting it. This is like 2013. And I think, and looking back on it, like I didn't know any of these people. I remember this was like when MK Paulson had first moved to Austin. I think I saw MK's first Cold Town set. And I was just in the crowd. I remember I don't know, it's weird. Now I go there and it's just, I'm used to it and it's a small, intimate room, but then it just seems so big to me.
Yeah.
Like even an open mic seems like such a big production to me.
Yeah. And
I was in awe of everybody, but I didn't get the vibe of like, I definitely want to do this. I think I was just really curious about it. And then eventually I went with the same group of people to the Velveeta room, and I was late getting there. And their friend had already gone up. I got there right when their friend got up, and after their friend went up, everyone left. And I felt weird leaving in the middle of the show, so I just sat through Velv mic. And this is like 2013 as well, just by myself watching all the comics. And then the thought just kind of grew from there. And then I think eventually I just started thinking of sets and jokes. And I think by the time I had like a lot of things in mind that I wanted to talk about, that's when I figured out maybe I should just get on stage and see what happens. And so it was at Rattle Inn. I think Yola Un hosted a mic at Rattle Inn on Thursdays in 2015. I know it's not there anymore.
Okay.
But I did that mic, and I would just do that mic. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but
well, I'm hanging on to some questions. So yeah, let's pause there because I don't know why I had this notion in my head that you came to Austin for comedy, but it sounds like you came here for work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I should probably back up to how I even got to Texas. So yeah, I went to that private school, Waterbury. I went to UMass Amherst. It's in Western Massachusetts for college. Really cool place. And basically I graduated. I was a sports management major in college.
Okay.
And I got a job in Austin right out of school. It was literally the only job I got out of college. It was between,
nice.
Basically I was just trying to work in sports, and I got 2 interviews. One was with the Albuquerque Thunderbirds, and one was with the Austin Spurs, but they used to be the Austin Toros.
Okay.
And that's the Spurs minor league team. And the Spurs were the only one that made me an offer. And I had a professor, Todd Crockett, in college, who was a swimmer at UT in like the 80s when they were really good. And he always had really good things to say about Texas and Austin. And he was always wearing Texas stuff. And I always got really positive feedback about Austin. So I just moved. And this is like, I just looked it up online a little bit. I didn't know anybody who lived here. And I just basically graduated on a Saturday, and I flew down on like a Tuesday with suitcases, and then I just lived in Austin.
Wow.
And just stayed. So
that's a bold move.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's just a really bold move when you've just grown up in.
Well, you're so ignorant. Like ignorance is bliss.
Yeah,
you don't think through it. It just
sure.
felt like, I think I was just so anxious just to be working. So yeah, that was May of 2010. And I just stuck around. So I was here for, like 5 years before I even did comedy.
So you had no idea what the comedy scene was other than your friend inviting you to the...
I have another friend, and this is one of the people that hired me with this. I was hanging out with him last night. We saw a movie, but he's way into movies and he's way into comedy. So the first time I was at Cap City was with him to see Anthony Jeselnik, and this is like 2010 or 2011. This is when Anthony Jeselnik wasn't quite, he was pretty big. Like it was a sold out show, but he wasn't huge. And, we saw that. And then also I saw, a season sorry at a Moon Tower show, maybe the first spring I was here. So like spring of 2011. But again, had no clue that I would ever want to do comedy or would like be a part of, that festival at any point. So it was, looking back on it, it was kind of weird, but like then I had no idea I wanted to do comedy in any way. So yeah.
Wow. That is kind of wild to just be like, chugging along. Oh yeah, let me try this.
Yeah.
And then like in 2 years, like you've made a splash on the scene, and you're booked regularly. And
well, I think, Austin's kind of good in the sense that you have so many opportunities to get on stage and see good comedy, that you can get good pretty fast, if you kind of stick with it. But like my first, I did a mic in April of 2015, and then the first time it went pretty well. And then second time I bombed, and then I just really didn't do it for a while. Like I'd say for the first, I think everyone has that story where like you dip in one time, and then for the first 6 months I probably did like 10 open mics. And then I think it occurred to me like, oh, you probably have to just do this more consistently to get good. So it was really like October 2015 that I got serious about doing it and going out, multiple times a week.
Yeah. I used to just focus on, tell me about that first time on stage.
Yeah.
But now I'm actually more interested in that second time on stage. Because, if you're drunk enough the first time you can get through, or, you just...
I wasn't, that's the thing. I can't, I don't know, you do comedy, like, I can't do comedy drunk. I've only been drunk on stage, really one time. I don't know if you ever, Velveeta Room, Mario did a show where you just do your closer.
Okay.
He just has like 50 people do their closer. And this was during the NBA finals. So I was watching the finals and just drinking. And cause I was figuring like I could do one joke that I know really well, intoxicated, but I can't do like sets intoxicated. I can't do it. Yeah. It freaks me out.
Yeah. So what was it? How do you define that you bombed?
It was just zero reaction, just blank faces.
Yeah.
I remember the first set went well, so I invited a friend of mine to come to the second set. Just really cocky, like, like this is great. And I think the first joke went bad, and I think when you're new, you don't really know how to handle that.
Yeah.
Like how to have any composure, and then also you have no confidence in the other material anyway, because it's all new material. And I just rushed through all my jokes and got off stage, and just didn't want to quit, but take a break.
Wounds a little bit.
Yeah. It was brutal. It was bad.
I mean, especially with somebody. I don't know. I'm projecting because my son is in sports, and I kind of see a mentality around that. But I think when you're in sports and competitive sports, you're like very focused on the hard work that you need to do, and you're rewarded. By doing all of that hard work. So you probably have that mindset that
for sure
I'm going to do this and I'm going to be good. And bombing, what? No.
But I think especially early, like I didn't have the perception of how much work you had to do. I almost thought you could do like a mic a week and you're a comic.
Yeah.
But then you see yourself not getting better. But I think also what's hard to, maybe you can relate to this, is when you first start doing comedy, like, especially Austin, it's very much a community. And there's a lot, it's like, if you go to any mic, you see people talking and like hugging each other. And, you see that deep camaraderie. And like, when you're very new, like, not only are you struggling with being, a new comic, you're also struggling with not being in that intricate community yet. You're kind of an outsider. Not that people are rude, but just naturally you're kind of the new person in the group. So I think it's easy to you feel isolated. You're not doing well on stage. You're intimidated. So I think that's one of the things too that kind of stifled me from being out a lot early. But then at some point you have to just decide to get over it.
So you said you took a break. How long of a break did you end up taking?
Man, it was I'd say for 6 months, it was very much, in a month I'd do 2 mics, or in a month I'd do 1 mic. It was just very inconsistent. And there was only like a couple places I would go.
And why?
I see, and I've talked to other people about this too. So like, I know a lot of people, like I worked with a guy who wanted to do stand up and we would talk about it. And he always talked about trying to get on the cap mic and just emailing to get on. And my perception was like, I don't want to be there until I'm good at comedy.
Yeah.
So like, I didn't do the cap open mic until like March of 2016. So I've been doing it for like over a year. I didn't, same with Velv and same with Cotown. Like I didn't want to do good mics until I felt like I was good. So for me, I wanted to find random places that I felt like people wouldn't be at where I could do poorly and, it wouldn't have an impact.
And being where you are now, do you think that was a good strategy?
Yeah.
Or you're happy with that?
I'm glad, because I think that, bombing at Rattle Inn in front of like 7 people hurt, but then like, I don't know if I would have handled doing poorly at like a cat mic where you're not only, you have an audience, but you also have, people who, you have other known good comics in town are doing that. But at the same time, I think different people are different, because I also know a lot of comics who are good now who did their first time at Cap or at Velv. I think there's value to that too, because you get to see good comics consistently. So I think it works well every way, but I think for my personality, I wanted to really just I wanted to work toward doing good mics.
And at what point did you start feeling comfortable in your...
I don't know. I think that's like I don't even know if I feel, it's weird. Like I feel way better, but I don't know if I still feel like 100%, like I don't have a voice yet for sure. I think it's, even though like I'm doing a lot better, I know I still have a ways to go.
Yeah.
But I'd say what I felt like, it took me a while to get booked on shows. That was a slow burn. But I'd say like,
how long?
It took me, so let's say like I started in April. Let's say I really started in like October. That's when I got consistent, like around September, October 2015. It took me 2.5 months. I think November I got booked on something.
How did that feel? Given that you were like, you seemed like really in your head about.
It felt good.
Yeah.
It felt good. Well, I think my journey in Austin comedy is kind of different where like I kind of was doing kind of like outside and independent stuff. I wasn't really doing a lot of mainstream stuff like mics or shows. Like I don't know if you ever heard of Slim's Last Call. It's like this guy, Frank Washington, he started a bar in North Austin. This is like North Austin around Oak Knoll 183.
Okay.
And, he started a bar and he started a mic. And this is around that time where I first started getting more serious. And I wanted to do it just because, a lot of the other open mics, like you can sense where people are regulars or like known. So I wanted to do this brand new mic at this brand new bar because it's like, I can kind of start fresh with this place.
Sure.
And be comfortable. So Frank Washington had this place called Slim's Last Call and it was brand new. It didn't have like a liquor license.
Oh man.
It was a very new place. I think I was the first person to show up to their first mic. And they would just bring food. They would just bring food and drinks for free, just to try to get people in the building. So it was a very like warm place, but that was the first place I really felt comfortable because I could just do whatever. And, like a lot of the kind of the more mainstream folks wouldn't go to that mic because it was really far north and then nobody knew Frank and no one knew the bar. But that was the first place I would just go to Slim's. And the thing about Slim's too is it was a diverse room. So he would book these showcases where he would charge at the door. And it would be mostly a black audience. It would be mostly a minority audience, which you really can't get in Austin. So all my first show experience was doing black shows. And it was good. It was a good experience. But it was also, it was definitely intimidating because even when you first get on a show, you get from doing like 5 minutes at mics to doing longer sets. It was a lot, but I'm glad I was able to learn kind of on that outside circuit and then, start doing different shows in Austin.
Does that still exist? Does that?
No. Actually it does. So Slim's was going for like, let's say like 6 to 8 months. And then they moved to a different spot in Round Rock. It's kind of like this little place in Round Rock that same deal. Like they'll do shows from time to time and it's diverse audience. And me and Devin went up there like 6 months ago to do a show. Yeah. And it's fun. It's a good, and it's something that you're not going to get, you're not going to get it in Austin.
Right.
You're not going to get a lot of diverse crowds in Austin. It just never happened. I know sometimes like, Cap and Velv pull in diverse audiences based on the headliner. Right. Which is great. That does happen. But as far as like comics kind of on our level who aren't headlining clubs yet, if you really want to get a diverse audience, you have to leave Austin to get that. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's just a shame. I mean, I certainly have seen an added diversity.
Right.
There's, instead of just one name that I could think of now, there are at least on possibly 1 to 2 hands names that it's like, okay, they're not the generic white hipster comic.
It's getting more diverse, but I think it's also, it's cyclical. I think as far as like gender diversity and general diversity, when you think about like just comics within our scene, we have these waves where like, I think like in the last year, we had a lot of like our top, female comics move to different places, but then immediately you see a crop of new ones come into the scene, but then go out of the scene. So it happens. I think it's the same thing with kind of diverse comics. We had, different diverse comics leave in the last 6 to 8 months. So, just kind of new people are going to have to come up. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk. What do I want to talk about next? Do you feel comfortable wearing the comic label? Because you're in that camp where you have a full-time job and you're doing this, and there's the Bridgetown is a pretty cool credential to have.
Yeah, I was real fortunate on that. That was a surprise. I don't call myself a comic just because I think for me, it's like I don't make a living doing comedy. It's definitely a goal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I make a living, working. So
Yeah.
if people, I think I didn't tell my family I did comedy for like a year.
Oh, wow.
Maybe longer. And I didn't tell them. My mom just found out from Facebook. Oh. And I didn't, I was not very open about it.
Huh.
And then my friends, I didn't really invite friends out until almost a year or two, until I started getting booked on shows and I felt comfortable. It really wasn't until like the first FPI I did that I really was more social about doing comedy. But, I don't talk, like when I meet new people, I never mention I'm a comic.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get money here and there. You get like a little bit of club work. You get a little bit of money. And some shows will pay you, but like until I'm like making a living off comedy, I won't call myself a comic.
Interesting. Because I don't know if you ever listened to Leading the Blind.
I have. I've listened to a lot of that's it's great.
This is one of the best podcasts.
Yeah.
It's interesting how often it comes up that they will critique people who are doing the open mics who don't say, well, you're a comic. I mean, you're a comic if you go up on stage.
Right.
And your boundary is very clear that, until I can make a living.
Until I'm making a living,
this,
I'm not saying it.
Yeah.
But I get it though. I mean, certainly within the scene, I think there's a definition among comics and there's a definition to everybody else. I just think for me, like, if I'm talking to someone I just met,
sure,
I say
sure.
I don't know. It's like, I don't know, just because you play pickup basketball 3 times a week doesn't mean you introduce yourself as a basketball player. So
that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
I think that's my perception. But yeah, I mean, certainly like within the scene, yeah, I guess here I'm a comic in that sense. But in my other life, I'm not.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. So which came first, your first FPIA or Bridgetown?
FBI, yeah, that came first. Yeah, that'd be crazy if it was the inverse. I didn't even know what Bridgetown was. Well, the thing was when I was first doing like Rattle In, let's say like weekly, when I started, FPIA was going on.
Okay.
So FPIA is kind of a cool thing in the sense that like it's a good measuring stick for me of when I started to where I'm going. And then, so I started April 2015, April 2016 was the first FPIA I did. And, I made semis the first year.
Cool.
And then and I think that helped in the sense that I've been doing all these kind of like random shows outside Austin. Like I was mostly just doing Slim's shows. And then FBI kind of helped get me out there to different bookers in town. So from there, I got a lot of different shows that were actually in Austin in the city. And then, I don't know where Bridgetown really came from.
Before we get there, cause you used some interesting, you worded it really interestingly to me, the way that you said FPIA for you was a way for you to benchmark yourself. And I hear, there's a million conversations about FPIA, but I'm not sure that anybody, well, I mean, there are people that say, well, my benchmark is this year I get out of prelims. And then
I listened to Nick Savarino's and I've heard, Mac Blake's Leading the Blind. And he talks about that, how, and I think he talks about the progression in the sense of how you do. But I think also it's a good benchmark for me in terms of just looking at your material year to year. So I remember even, going from just starting comedy to doing FPI the first year, you obviously come along. You see a lot of growth early. Yeah. But then even from like year 1 to year 2, so I did my second FPI this year. And just seeing how your material changes. And just seeing how much better you get. Yeah. I didn't get to finals, but I felt like I felt better about my material. Yeah. For sure.
Well, and having that confidence of just, how do you sit with your own performance is really important. I mean, there are so many people that just think
people have different feelings about it. I think my feeling is a couple of things. I think for one, it can only help you regardless of how you do. That's the thing. Like even if you don't get out of prelims, but you have a set that you feel really good about, and you're going to get booked on more shows. You're going to get more work. I remember the first time I did FPIA, my first year, my prelim set, I was in the same group as LaShonda.
Oh, wow.
And I remember having a conversation I never met her. And we talked. She was always really approachable. She was always really approachable, really nice to everybody. And after the first prelim set, we were talking. She's like, if anything, you're going to get work. And by work, just getting on shows, you're going to get work out of this. Just think about that. And I think that's how you have to look at it, especially if you're a new comic. Like, obviously I'm competitive. I want to win.
Yeah.
You know, I take it seriously, but if anything, just go out and have a good showing. And it's going to do good things for you, regardless. That's why I think, the way I look at it, people get kind of like upset about it and like how it's judged, and like, but the club doesn't have to do it. I think that's what you have to remember.
Right.
Like, it is a privilege to do it, that you get to, no matter where you are as a comic, you get to do a set at the main club in your city.
In the big room. Full.
With a professional tape, with Dustin taping it.
Yeah.
You're gonna get a good tape. So for me, it's like, there's nothing to pout about. Like, just enjoy the experience and just do the best you can and get that tape. Because what the tape does too is, even if you don't get to the finals or you don't advance, take that tape and you can use that to apply to festivals. You can use that to try to get on the road. So I don't know. And granted, yeah, comedy contests are tricky, but I think just focus on just doing the best you can.
So you have a really pragmatic approach to, you know.
Yeah, I just, you know, obviously we all get in the fields. Like, I came back, my semi set was right after I came back from Bridgetown, and I had my semi set like the day of or the day after, and didn't do as well. You know, didn't have a great set. And, it's frustrating. It really gets to you. But then I think, Matt Bearden talks about this on his episode, how, you get frustrated, but then you come back really motivated.
Right.
And you really write hard for the next couple months, and you keep that going. So it's fine. You just got to work through it. But overall, it's a good opportunity that you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did Bridgetown come about?
That was just a random, I kind of, the first, after my first year of comedy, my goal was like to do a festival just to get out of Austin, see what it's like. So I did a Crossroads Comedy Festival. It's in Indianapolis. It's like a improv. It's very much like Out of Bounds.
Okay. So it's a mix of
improv and stand up.
Okay.
And it was in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I applied to that and got in. I talked to Karina, had done it the year before I did it, and I talked to her about it, and she had good things to say, so I did it. And then my goal was just like, I want to do a festival every year. You know, or I want to get out of town every year.
Yeah.
You know, modest. And then I just applied and I got it, but I didn't know what it really meant. You know, I didn't really know that it was, to me, it's just like, like, I'm happy. But then I get the vibe, like, especially within the comedy world, it is something that you hang on to as a credit. So I was fortunate. My perception of it was just that the year before I did it, so many good Austin comics had done it. So that's why I shot for it.
Yeah.
Cause I know, like, the year before, I went, like, there weren't a lot of Austin comics that went this year because so many went last year. But I think the year before it was like Martin, MK, Abby, Ella Gale, Youssef. It was a pretty deep list of really good Austin comics I really looked up to. So I was like, I'd love to get on it. And that's really the main reason I applied. And then it's just a great experience. Yeah.
And have you used the experience to either add to your networking or to really push yourself to?
For sure.
Are you thinking about changing your goal to do more than one out of 10?
You know, for sure on both of those. I think, it's, as far as networking, like, I'm a really introverted person. Like, I'm not an extrovert, but I think there's networking's intimidating in that respect. But I think the good thing about festivals, especially like, that experience was it's very organic. As far as meeting people, like, cause you're a comic you're around comics. Right. So people who are like-minded, but you're also at this really fun event. So you're just naturally just having conversations. And before you know it, you come home and you have like, 25 more people who are in your network.
Yeah.
You know, it's really cool. And even like Crossroads is like that. Even doing the Crossroads Festival, I met, a couple of people who ended up doing Bridgetown the same year. So it's just, nice. It's very casual and organic, and you don't have to like go in like trying to like hand out cards or like anything. Just be cool and be around and obviously do as best you can on stage. So
my observation as an audience and fan person when I go to Moon Tower, it is kind of neat to see the comics who, that they probably cross paths once or twice during the year, but Moon Tower is like this just big party for them. And it's like, you could tell there's reconnecting of friendships, and it is kind of cool.
Well, I listened to your episode with, Roy Perez.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, I guess he was doing his interview, and then the guy Sal from Practical, but they kind of talk about their history and how they know each other for so long. I think festivals are cool in that sense. You get to just reconnect with people, even if you don't know them that well. It's like, oh, like I've seen you before. We know each other.
I mean, it is unusual to hear of a comic that's just a jerk and that isn't.
That's also a thing I've noticed. Like, I was thinking about this last night too. It's like, the best comics are really the nicest. Yeah. We were talking about Dave Hill before we got on, and like Dave Hill is like the most extremely good comic, but just super approachable. And like super nice. And then I always feel that way, like within the Austin scene. I think it's very similar. Like I looked at someone like Maggie. It was like when I first started doing comedy, she'd been on TV, had a show, had a great mic, but was always just so approachable and like willing to give advice and talk. And I think when you start coming up as a comic, you kind of keep that in mind. Yeah. That's the template. Yeah.
Do you have a philosophy about the Austin scene because I mean, I've observed it. There's a very community feel. Yeah. Very supportive of each other. And then you have everybody that heads off to LA and New York where it's like a vicious piranha-like.
Well, and that's interesting. So I think, I have two thoughts on that. So one, it was weird. So we talked about Out of Bounds Festival a little bit, which was recent. I hosted a show, that show Dave Hill was on. You were at that show at New Movement, and a lot of the comics were from LA. I think all the comics except for Dave were from LA. And I remember
he was still introduced as an LA comic.
He was still introduced as an LA comic. Did I do that? That was my fault.
I don't know. No, I think somebody else.
I hosted that show, so I probably blew it. But talking to some of the comics backstage or in the green room who are from LA, they talk about LA as such a nurturing scene.
Really?
They're like, yeah, LA is like everyone's so supportive. And I think that just becomes like, maybe that's just our perception from the outside looking in, is like, you want to think, oh, it's a vision. And then granted, I'm sure it's, we talk about FPIA. I think what's interesting is like, people get competitive not for the first time, but it's the most competitive time.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the difference in those markets. Like there's more competition for paid gigs. There's more competition for industry. Yeah. So I think that definitely adds a little more of an element, but at the same time, like, it is also just a community. And it's, and like you were talking about, when you go to these festivals and you realize that you know so many people, it's a small world. Yeah. So I'm sure it's a little bit tougher, but I mean, I'm sure at the same time it is a community. The longer you're in it, I'm sure it's a community. And I think also too, it's like, I think it's easy to get intimidated about other scenes when you haven't done comedy outside of Austin. So I think that like doing different festivals out of town or traveling, you get a sense of like how you actually stack up. Right. And I feel like I've had moments where I felt like I stack up well, and moments where you realize you have like ways to go. But I think the more confidence you get when you travel, like you don't worry so much about like it being vicious, just worry about being good.
Yeah. You have struck me as being very goal-oriented.
Yeah.
What are some next goals for yourself that you've set, or is that something that you just, because as an introvert, I can appreciate that you never really want to disclose.
I never want to disclose my dreams. I feel like, if you tell your wishes, they don't come true and you blow out the candles. But I don't know. I think it definitely evolves based on things that come along. I think sometimes experiences help you realize what you can do. Yeah. So I think like getting certain festivals or doing well in contests or just doing certain shows that go well make you think, oh, maybe I could do more than I thought I could. But I think for me, my goal is just to, especially right now, just take advantage of stage time and just keep getting better. And I think kind of sticking to just finding opportunities to get outside Austin and do comedy. I'm not like, I think eventually moving will be something that becomes more of a real possibility, but I think more of my focus is just take opportunities. You could still go to LA for like a week or 2 weeks, or go to New York for a week or 2 weeks and see what it feels like and just get the experience. So I think that's as valuable. Yeah. Yeah.
We haven't talked about how you approach comedy writing. And when I've observed you, like you're not the typical, what I see, somebody jotting in a notebook, like furiously getting ready. Right. You seem like you just walk in and you're like, you may sit in the corner just kind of observing the scene, but then you go up and you do your thing. And especially since, you almost stumbled into doing comedy, how did you decide what type of comedy and how you would write it out?
I don't know. I think my approach is, I just, I think the only time I really write things down is when I'm, like for sets. Like I definitely write sets down. So like going into like the out of balance sets, I think that you saw, like I definitely had a good idea of what I wanted to do coming in, and then I might just sit down before and just, I always write a set list. I never not write a set list. I'll say that.
Okay.
But as far as just like how I approach writing material, I don't know. I think it just, I never like block out time and say I'm going to write for the next 2 hours. Okay. I definitely just, ideas come when they come. I kind of just, if I get an idea, I send it to myself. I email it to myself, and then I'll try it at mics, and then I'll see what's working. And then,
and how do you judge if something is working or not?
All right. So I do this thing where, I do this thing where when it gets on paper is you email it to yourself, and then I do it on mic, and then when I write set lists for mics too. Okay. Always. And so that's when it gets to paper, and it'll just be like, I don't write it out. I'll just write the concept, and then I'll know the joke behind it. Mm-hmm. And then if it goes well, I'll give it a check mark. If it goes poorly, I'll give it an X. And then if it goes okay, I'll give it a 1/2. And then like a note. So like usually my open mic lists have like checks and X's and halves.
You really do have a sports brain, don't you?
Yeah. And then, so then like the checks are like a firm, but then you also gotta like, you market test to see consistency. So then it's like, if one of those checks are checks at 3 different mics, then it's a real check. If those halves stay halves, then you kind of drop them off. And then those X's you get rid of you shed the X's pretty fast. So that's kind of like, I guess, the process for me. Huh. But that definitely evolves too. I'm sure I could do better. Yeah.
Do you, I think I talked about this with somebody else, and I do try to, focus my job here on this recording as the interviewer, not necessarily somebody who's going to the mic scene. But it's interesting to hear you say you drop the X's pretty quickly. But do you ever find yourself thinking that, well, I have a premise, I like it, I like the idea, but I let go. Yeah. Like,
but I will say that I do circle back to things sometimes. Okay. But usually I'll circle back to like halves. Like X's I don't usually, but I know what you're saying. Like sometimes you might think of something that makes it better and you can redo it and it works, but I found that like if certain jokes don't work, sometimes it's to be honest with yourself. Yeah. And I think I read that like Judd Apatow has a book called Sick in the Head.
Yeah.
And he just interviews comics. Like he's been interviewing comics, like when he was in high school, he did it. And then he did it as like he came back to these interviews and like rehashed them. But he had one with Jay Leno, I think from like the 80s. And Jay Leno talks about like not spinning your wheels on jokes that aren't good. And just kind of being honest with, like, don't, those halfway jokes that, like, you get a little reaction with, like, don't just keep doing them the same way. Just get rid of them, or either make them better or get rid of them. So I think being honest with yourself, especially when you're just doing open mics, about what's not good and not trying to just jam it into a certain peg. Yeah. So I get rid of bad jokes pretty fast.
That's impressive, though. I mean, that you can let go. Because it's your thoughts.
Well, it definitely sucks. Yeah. Because you definitely, I mean, I think you could relate to that even, like, when you're doing open mics, like, you think everything you write down is a good idea in your head.
Wow.
But then, then you have to accept, like, if you've done this joke 3 different times and it does poorly 3 different times, unless you're going to change something, it's insane to keep doing it.
Right.
But, which is hard. It's hard to let go of jokes.
But the silver lining on that approach is, well, get rid of the dead weight so that you can open yourself and your creative juices, so then when to something that is going to work.
For sure. You want to spin your wheels on things that are good, like working on good jokes. And then when you talk about like doing shows and stuff, then you have jokes that are tried and true, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. I have to say, I don't know, we're in the 70s range of the number of interviews done. I don't know that anybody has had that methodical of an approach to writing their sets, making, that kind of assessment and, that very process oriented way of.
Yeah. Well, everyone's so different.
Yeah.
Everyone's so different.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think people just approach getting ideas and writing so differently. And I think also, I think your process evolves on like your success. I think sometimes like if you have a good little run and you see something that you think's working, you might stick with it. But then if you have a run where you're in a rut, you might adjust things. So I think that process definitely waves from time to time, but that's usually what works for me. But I know everyone's different. Everyone's brain's just really different.
Yeah. All right. This is going to be do I want to ask this? Because I feel like I've asked a variation of this, but I don't know that I explicitly use these words. Is there a moment that you can think of where like the light bulb shone and you were like, this is what I was meant to do?
Ooh, that's intense. Man. Jeez, I felt like this is what I was meant to do. Man, I feel like the thing about comedy is like you have those special moments all the time.
Yeah.
Or you can.
Yeah.
I don't think I have one of those. And I think the other thing about comedy too is it's like you have really good moments and then you immediately get humbled.
Yeah.
So I think we talked about like Out of Bounds Festival and like, I mean, those are great. Those sets went, pretty well. And I felt pretty good about those. Yeah. I think I had like that week where you're like, oh yeah, I could just do comedy. And then you go back to doing mics the next week and you're put back in your place. Yeah. So I don't know. I definitely had like a few moments I look back on that were pretty good. I think probably the first one was, maybe like prelims of FPI this past year went pretty well. That was a good moment. But also, I think moments that are the best for me, I think, is when new material works, which isn't even like at good shows. Sometimes it's like when you realize something new works really well. Those are good moments. And I think also moments where you're out of Austin and things work. Yeah. Because then you really feel like those things are actually funny. So I think like looking at the festival experiences, the two festivals I've gotten to do, when I had good sets there, that felt really, really good just because it makes you think like, yeah, it really makes you believe you could do it because it's more, you have some universally funny things. Right. So I think that's one thing I get scared of is like you do a lot of stuff in Austin, you get really comfortable in Austin, and then like what happens when you go to, Philadelphia or New York or LA or Portland or wherever. So when things work out of town, like when I do, like I've done shows in like, I don't know if you know like Josh Castro, he's a comic in Austin.
Sounds familiar.
And he books like, when I was first doing comedy and I was doing like Slim's Last Call, but I was also doing like a lot of his shows and kind of different shows throughout Texas. I would do like, like Lago Vista, Johnson City, Lakeway, Cedar Park. There's a lot of different places, but like when you can have success in like a bar in Johnson City or, an outdoor bar in like Lakeway, like, and things work there, and like those are actually just good moments because you feel like you're really finding things there. So I think those, like I look back, I think those are like good moments. Like even though they're not the biggest shows, you learn a lot from just doing it. So, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I don't know if I even really answered that question. Looking back on it, I didn't answer that question at all. But.
That's okay. That's okay. Let's ask let me ask you a couple of things more before we start talking about the things that you want to promote. What is it? And sometimes by the time I get to the end of these, I feel like I'm just asking a different iteration of something I've already asked. Yeah. I should do better at that.
I should do better at answering questions.
No. What do you love about being a performer? You just answer that kind of. I mean, I'm just going to stop us right there. I mean, no. That universal response kind of thing.
I think it's, I mean, there's definitely a selfish aspect to it, right? Where it's like you get pretty instant gratification. But I think the good thing about it, like if you really like doing comedy, I feel like to do comedy, like you actually have to like it. Yeah. I feel like the interesting thing about sports is like you could really carry on sports and not like it, and like maybe your talent can like carry you maybe, or like for a certain time. But I feel like with comedy, at no level of comedy can you not like it and do it. Yeah. And if you can, then like you're just really talented. Yeah. But I think like if comedy is something that you do that gives you genuine joy, then like being on stage is sharing that joy with other people. I think that's kind of a special thing. You're giving people a good time. I think that's something I like about it. So yeah, I think that's probably like the best thing about comedy is like you're kind of sharing something that's happy and good for you with other people, and that's good.
Yeah. And what scares you about being a performer?
I think there's the same natural fear everyone has. I mean, you're open yourself up for a lot of judgment. So I think that's there. I think you get to a point where you kind of shrug it off, but and there's the constant stress of, you have to make it happen every time you get on stage. Every time you get on stage, you can't live off any. So like, if you could have a string of great sets, but like, I'm not famous. No one knows who I am. So every time I'm on stage, I have to do well. You're as good as your last set.
Yeah.
So I think that probably just the general anxiety of you have to prove it again every time you do it.
Right.
So that's a little stressful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know that I mentioned up front the upcoming Spite Fest, but you've also been, I keep hearing your name with this Alamo Laugh House, and I don't know anything.
I've been doing that. So Alamo Laugh House is like, I think like maybe Jared and Ariel started it, and there's a different host every week.
Okay.
So I host the first Thursday every week.
Okay.
And it's at the Alamo Draft House Village. And it's a cool little show. I think it's something that there's a lot of growth opportunity with it. But it's a cool little show. It's a cool location. Really, it's just like the crowds are just catching people coming out of movies.
Yeah.
So it's a crapshoot, but it's been fun. And that's actually going to end for a while until the spring. Cause like we're getting into deep fall. So.
Oh, yeah. It's going to dip down into the 70s. It's
going to dip down. No one's going to, right. Well, it's going to get Austin uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think the last one I'm doing is, I guess, the first week of October. So I guess it's like the 4th, maybe.
Okay.
That'll be my next one. And then, I'll be done until TBD, I guess, probably April.
Well,
that'll be a big hiatus. Yeah.
Like dropping the bad joke, that'll just open you up for, the next gig, right?
Yeah. Hopefully open up to just doing more mics and, putting X's in my notebook.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, and the Spite Club. So I got to see my very first one.
Man.
What is that? 2 weeks ago.
And it was so good. And now we have to come off like the best Spite Club. And also, I don't know, like
it is kind of funny, the pairing, because you two are like just so nice.
We're friends, but like, I also like, neither of us are really mean.
Right.
And I don't enjoy being mean, especially to like one of my friends. Like Devin's a good friend. So it'll be, but I think that's almost what makes it more interesting. But it was weird because they asked Devin to do it and he got to pick, who he's going to go against. And he asked me, and I initially was like, I really do not want to do it. And then John Raven reached out to me after. He's like, well, Devin wants you to do it. So now you have to, like, now I have to see this, So we'll have fun with it. I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah. And I guess it's a small probability that anybody listening to this doesn't know what it is, but it is I guess I would describe it, and
it's 4 comics too.
It is very
it really
much
is 4 comics.
It's a roast battle type of concept, but it's got games. They kind of did rounds.
Pat Dean and John Raven are so perfect for it.
So good. Yeah.
But Enzo and Danny Goodwin's, it was amazing. It was just so, and I think what was amazing is like, they put so much time into it. So much time and thought, and you could tell. Yeah. So like, I was at it, and I hadn't been to one in a while, but like, it was like, I really need to prepare for this month. So, and I think it's interesting because like between them and like our tone and energy is so different from Danny and Enzo and Pat. So, it'll be fun. We'll see what happens. But that's next month. So,
and it's at the Valve, that kind of adds to it because it's a great venue.
It's a comedy. It's 4 comics.
Yeah.
It's a fun night for the scene.
Yeah. There were some non-comics that were in that crowd, and they were just...
Some things are over their head. I think they get into the energy, but that shows for the back of the room.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
All right.
We have a show too. So I have a show with, I know Danny mentioned on his, but, Danny Goodwin, Michael Good, myself, we have a show at Shed Barbershop.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Called, Closed for Comedy. Yeah. And it's, the 3rd Friday of every month. So it's kind of monthly. They just opened a new location they're about to. So we skipped this month, but we should be back in October. But yeah, it's a great, we've had 3 so far. They've all been good turnout. So we're really excited about that.
And are the rumors true? Danny saying, I don't know about this title.
Oh, geez. Ooh. Now we just embrace. It's so funny too because I think Danny put it.
gotten past that hump.
He put it well because like everything about Shed they're so good to us. They're such a good partner with the show. They're so supportive. They promote well. And I think at first we got caught up in the name, but now we just embrace it. Like now it just works.
Yeah.
I like it. I think their big thing is they didn't want to like have a show that was a pun on being a barbershop. That was their big thing. And now we just get it. And it's fine.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun and they've all been really good. So we're excited. Plus like hosting with, Danny and Mike are two comics I really like and look up to. So it's good.
Yeah. Awesome. What is the date of that Spite Club show?
Ooh, Spike Club. So whatever that Thursday is, I don't have a calendar, but I want to say it's the 6th. But you know what? Let's just I'm gonna pull up my calendar on my phone. Okay. And see. I think it's the same night as there'll be an Alamo Laugh House that same night. It'll be double dipping.
Oh.
On shows. The 5th.
The 5th.
October 5th. It's on my calendar. Spike Club and Alamo Laugh House.
Would I not believe you? He's showing me his phone as if I need,
on my Google Doc. But yeah, that should be that should be fun.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Awesome. Well, are you ready?
I'm ready. So this is I'll let you ask it, but I'm prepared.
I was re-listening to an interview because I'm having somebody come back a second time, and I was re-listening, and
you having Ariel back, right?
I'm having Ariel back.
That's awesome.
And what
She's
was
awesome.
funny is that she had done her homework, and she never even let me ask the question. She's like, I was thinking about this. And then she like elaborated on why she came up with her answer.
These are tough questions. I have to dig into my life.
I hope I never have to answer that question. I never
interview you now.
The nice thing is, never will. All right. So, Justin, one word to describe your future.
I just work. That's the one word.
Man, not even a pause, not even a breath. You're just like, I'm ready.
You got work to do.
Yeah.
Just keep grinding. I think that's the thing with comedy. I don't know. Like I think there's plenty of people who have talent, but I think the people who are really doing well, it's like who have the work ethic that matches the talent. So I think, I don't know. I think the hard thing about my life, not hard, but it's like you have a day job and you have your personal life. And it's like, I think it's easy to get light on comedy, but you really have to stay pretty focused. So I think just keep working.
Yeah.
Keep working.
All right.
You did it?
I think is there something I should have asked?
I think we got through the journey pretty well. Yeah. This is good.
Once we figured out
once we got mics going, we made it happen. No, this is awesome.
Anybody that wants to volunteer as a producer, it's an unpaid gig, but I do offer chocolate, so
there's Hershey's chocolate and pens. You have pens. Is this mine?
It's totally yours.
Nice.
Because there's one thing that all comics need is a pen.
I take pens very seriously.
Cool. Well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham presents Justin Hicks. Tell us where we can find you on social media, website. Let's recap in one fell swoop upcoming shows.
That's an area to grow. I have a Twitter, but I don't do much on it. It's at Hicks_JN. I have like 100 followers. I
think I found you and I'm like, he does not tweet.
I do not tweet. I really just retweet shows. If the promoters want you to tweet, I'll retweet shows. But I'm at Hicks_JN. Not a good handle. It shouldn't have underscores in there.
That's very,
self-aware, but we're not doing it. But, and then just Facebook, Justin Hicks, you could probably find me pretty easily. Mm-hmm. That's where most of my stuff is. I don't have anything else. Show-wise, I have, I'm opening for Knockout at the New Movement, this coming Monday. I guess it would already have happened by the time this is on, but it's at 9:30 at New Movement. I'll be at Joey Zimmerman has a great show called Glow Show. It's at Genuine Joe's Coffee. I think that's a 8 p.m. show on the September 23rd. This airs before that. And then, after that, what do we have going on? I think just Sorry Clothes for Comedy. Shed Barbershop. Mm-hmm. Third Friday of every month. Check us out. We're on Facebook. You can find us. We're on Do 512. Okay. That's with Danny Goodwin and Michael Good. And then Alamo Laugh House will be coming to you, I guess October 5th, we decided.
Yep.
And that's at 9 p.m. at Alamo Draft House Village. And then that same night at 11 p.m. at the Velveeta Room, you can see Spike Club. That's me versus Devin Walker. I'm going to need shoulders to cry on, so come to that. Come to that show.
It's going to be amazing. Two nice guys. Just, I could see it just like.
Devin always makes fun of me. This is his comfort zone.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, make sure you go check out all of those shows. And keep an eye out for Justin. He's going to be on more festivals and more shows.
He's got to do the work.
Do the work, yep. We hope you've enjoyed learning about how Justin got to be the comedic genius that you heard today just as much as I have. Be sure to visit comedywham.com, give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at comedywham, and like our Facebook page. You can listen to past interviews on Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes, and review us while you're at it. This has been Comedy Wham Presents Justin Hicks. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.